joining us for today's ESPC community webinar. Today I'm joined by Eliane Burgers, who will cover unlocking Dataverse Functions. Code less, do more. We love hearing what you guys have to say, so remember to join the conversation about today's webinar and more on X. Our handle is at ESPC_community and our hashtag is hashtag ESPC25. Tweet us, tag us, and tell us what you learned. Don't forget to check out our Learning Hub, which updates the latest blogs, ebooks, webinars, and how-to videos. You can access and view the Learning Hub by visiting our website, sharepointeurope.com, and clicking the Content tab at the top. Don't let the learning stop here. Continue to keep up and stay ahead by joining us for our next webinar, Unlocking AI Prompts, the Swiss Army Knife of Microsoft Power Platform, with Sebastian Sturm on Thursday, 9th of October at 11 a.m. CEST. For more information on this webinar, please check out www.sharepointeurope.com/register for webinars. Get €150 off your ESPC 25 ticket with the late bird sale, limited time only. Join Europe's leading Microsoft 365, Azure, and AI community in Dublin from the 1st to the 4th of December 2025. Don't miss your chance to connect, learn, and grow with the best in the industry. Book now and save €150. After the webinar, we'll have a questions and answer session. Type any questions you might have in the chat box. Questions will be selected and answered at the end of the presentation. This webinar will be recorded and added to the Resource Center, where you'll be notified by email when it is available. And now I'm going to pass you over to today's webinar presenter, Eliane. Hello, Eliane. Thanks for joining us today.
Hi, good morning, or at least it's morning on my side. Good to have you all here. I'm gonna share my screen, in which I do have my presentation. So today, as a Power Platform consultant or developer, it's, to be honest, not my goal to just code more. I do like it, but my main goal is to do more. And that's what I want to show you today, how you can use Dataverse functions to just code less and be able to do more. A little bit of the history about it. We still do have like C# plugins, which is full code, and some people were a long time in the field of also the dynamics development. You're familiar with JavaScript web resources, all those things. You kind of need to use a lot of code to achieve what you want to achieve. And then there are the low-code plugins. And formerly they were known as the low-code instant plugins. And of course, Microsoft loves to rename things. It's now called functions. And that's what we were going to use and have a deep dive in today. And but what are plugins? I'm just checking my PowerPoint to move on. Yeah, there it is. Plugins are like you have the ability to like extend your business process. You can do a lot of the things with the out-of-the-box functionalities, but there are a lot of scenarios in which you just want to add some more logic into your project. And it's good to really be aware of what kind of solution or things you use in which kind of scenarios. And plugins are really useful in scenarios in which you would like to have when another declarative process doesn't meet your needs, then you can move on and use plugins and apply business logic. And there are different kind of options to apply business logic inside of your Dataverse environment, etc. And you're probably familiar with some of them. Like we do have the business rules available in case we are creating like a model-driven app. You can use like workflows, you can use actions. Of course, you can go and create a lot of different kind of Power Automate flows. And there are even like maybe a more simpler solutions like creating a formula and calculated columns, all of them to have some business logic inside of the way what you're going to automate. And then we do have the plugins in which we can kind of divide them into low code and pro code plugins. But today it's about the low code part. And for the low code plugins, we do have actually two different types of plugins. We do have the automated ones, and we do have the functions, which were called previously the instant ones. That's more like a custom API. And for the automated ones, we do have some things we need to be aware of. That's something we can trigger based on a create, an update, or delete event, what happens inside of a table. And it sticks to just one specific table you mentioned up front. And you can use it pre or post an operation which takes occur into the table. And you can only create them via the Dataverse Accelerator app, which we will go into later on in the presentation to show how that looks like. So what's the difference compared to the functions? The functions, that's something you can trigger on demand, just on different moments inside of your process, you can trigger them. And it's also bound to tables, but it can be bound to multiple tables, which is a big difference compared to the automated ones. And you can define some specific input and both output parameters, which you need inside of your process. And maybe the coolest part, you can use it from multiple artifacts. And you can trigger it from an app and from a flow. And later on, we will see a lot of demos how that will look like. So why should we use the PowerFX plugins, the functions? They are kind of really useful, and they provide a readable format and for like really specific logic. And to be honest, for me as a low-code developer, like a C# plugin is I can read the code, but it's kind of hard. But I'm used to the PowerFX way of reading logic, so that's a really good part of the functions, that it's just the same kind of language which you're used to. And so they do have great benefits in which you can use them to run transactions, and they are kind of really flexible in different kind of scenarios. And the cool part is you can reuse them in multiple parts as a function. So this to summarize, they are the main advantages can be summarized in those 4 points. You can reuse them. It's really modular. They're really maintainable for different kind of users. So of course also for the full code Fusion developers, but also for the low code ones. And they are really readable. So that makes it your life a little bit easier. So let's move on to some real-world examples related to the automated plugins. And first, we'll take a look in how can we create an automated plugin. I already mentioned that you need to use the Dataverse Accelerator app. And over here, we do have like an environment in Power Apps. And then you can see in the apps, there is the Dataverse Accelerator app available. In this app, you can create the automated plugin and apply your own code to it. So let's create one plugin. And as you can see, the plugin is already related to a table. And of course, we can give it a name and then decide on when should this plugin get triggered. In this example, I just give it a shot for when there is a row created, and then I want something to happen. In this case, as you can see in the expression, I would like to have the plugin to validate the start date. So the start date, which a user enters both start date and an end date into a form, I want the logic to validate if the start date is before the end date, so it won't mix up dates. And here there is a model-driven app in which the plugin is activated. And as a user, I can enter start date and an end date. And as soon as I click on save, the plugin is triggered and I get an error message. So as a user, I kind of get immediately feedback in which I entered my information correctly. And when I didn't do that, I can fix it and redo it. And the cool part from the automated plugin is that now I use this logic inside of a model-driven app. But in this scenario, I do have the same information available in a Canvas app as well. And therefore, I also want the start date to be had before the end date. So over here, I do have the same logic and the user gets the same immediately feedback. So that's exactly what we mean by code less, do more. I just need to create that little bit of parametric function or logic on one location, and it's activated in multiple parts, which is actually quite cool. Instead of I need to create it in all different on the different kind of apps we have. So another example in a lot of scenarios, we would like to have the user entering data, and we do have like to have a title, a name, or something else in which we decide on a naming convention. And of course, we can ask our users to apply that logic themselves and teach them how to like set a title, a date by themselves. But yeah, please be honest. Or when I'm a user, I will do that maybe the first couple of times and then I forgot it or I make a typo. And so we can use the plugin in that scenario as well. So as soon as the record is created, I want the record to have a new name based on other values that the user entered. Over here, I do enter. It's a new, in this example, a new grant, a new item a new record into the table. I need to add some data into it, and I want to save the data. And as soon as I'm saving it, the grant name is concatenated based on what I entered, and I don't need to like type it into myself. And now we can match the naming convention which we agreed on without bothering the user with doing manual stuff. And so we did have some examples based on creating a record, but we also can use an automated plugin in scenarios in which we would like to have, like, for example, a row is deleted. And when there are related rows, maybe we want to do something with them and give them a different value. And in this case, we can, when there is a record deleted, and then we just updated all the related records. So it's just an easy example, and also this one is just, it doesn't matter in which app you're using it, it's the logic which is running inside of the Dataverse itself. Another example to think of why you can use this kind of functionalities is in case you want to log things that are happening. And of course, you can use like the audit log, for example, but maybe you want to log your own details, maybe a limited set of data you want to log and you can use that as well in a plugin scenario. So the user won't see, or it doesn't affect them. It just logs something when something happens in another table. So that was some examples about the automated plugin part. And what, as the title of this webinar suggests, it's about the Dataverse functions. So let's move on to the function parts, which were formerly known as the instant plugin. So just to what is a function? It's something you can manually start from different kind of parts into your process, and you can pass a parameter as an input, and you can define output parameters, so the values that are return values from the logic you created. And it's good to know, to be aware of this runs inside of Dataverse and not in your browser. So let's see how easy actually it is to add a function inside of your solution. And this is a main difference between the automated plugins and the functions as well. Functions are not ready yet to have in your solution. So be aware of that regarding your ALM scenarios in which you want to move to different environments. So as here you can see, just like adding a flow into your solution, you can add a function. So let's start and create our first function, in which we do have the scenario that we do have an input, and that's the title, and we do want to have a short title as well, and we just want to shorten the title based on the limit of the amount of characters that is given as an input. So as here you can see, we do have the input parameter title, and we do have specified an output parameter. So let's go to a Canvas app and try to use and apply this logic. So as soon as you want to use a function inside of your Canvas app, you need to add the environment table. So the functions are like stored into the environment table, and then you can use them. And over here in this application, we just have an input, and we do have a button. And inside of this button, we want to have the shortened title available. And as you can see over here, we just mentioned we're setting like the variable using the update context, like the short title, and then we are relating to the environment table and mentioning the name of the internal name of the function we just created. And then we as the input parameter, we are giving and mentioning the text input from the Canvas app. So that looks like as follows: as a user enters a very long title, for example, and then as soon as you click on the button, the shortened title is given on the screen. So this just happened immediately, and we can use that and reuse this logic. So for example, now we are entering a new item using the Canvas app, but there are also a lot of scenarios in which you want to create a record, and by using a Power Automate flow. And the cool part of the functions is that you can use exactly the same logic into your Power Automate. You can use in your Power Automate flow, you can use the Dataverse action, perform an unbound action. And then you can just select the function you created, and it will be aware of what the input parameters you gave. And in this example, it was, we do want to have the title as an input. And I mentioned that title, and then we defined the output as the short title, and it's over here into my flow. So you can think of a lot of scenarios in which you can use this and reuse this everywhere. This is just one input, one output parameter, but you can have multiple inputs, multiple outputs, which you can use, which we'll have a demo later on. And of course, it's always good to monitor and test what you create. And for functions, it's exactly the same. So yeah, how can we have different kind of ways to test, monitor what will happen when we're activating a function? And when we do have this example and we are having the monitor session activated, we can see that the operation is like logged into the monitor details, and we can see exactly what goes through that kind of process as the input. And as you can see, it's behind the screens. It's like an API call which taken place, and we can see what happens over there. And in this scenario, it's just a text with a specific length, and we shorten it. But imagine scenarios in which you want to test multiple scenarios. We do have here a function in which we kind of validate if the email matches a specific, you can compare it kind of with a regex expression. And here I created this function in which I do have the email as the input, and like a boolean, the correct value as a true or false value, in which I just want to validate, is my email which I entered in correct or not. And we can move to the functions part into the Power Apps portal, and then select the function we create and click on test. And then we can enter some data and test, do I get the correct information? Do I get the true and false values in the correct way? So then I don't need to embed it all into an app before I can just validate if my function logic is correct. And as I mentioned before, we saw that the logic behind the screens is more like an API call. And of course, you can test it by using this way into your Power Apps portal. But I also want to mention like the availability into the XRM toolbox. There you have the custom API tester in which you can use your functions as well. So if you would like and stick to XRM toolbox USSS, you can use this one. And for like full coders, they are used to have a function and reuse that one into a function. And the cool part is we can use that in the functions of the Dataverse part as well. Over here, I do have the a new function, but I still want to use the function which we created before to shorten a title as well. So I just define a value, the shorten title, and I mentioned the other. And as you can see, I again need to mention the environment, setting the internal name of my other function, and then I can just set that kind of as a, call it a variable, and use that one into my new created function. So again, this is really cool. So we can do like code less and do more. Is this a good example to accomplish? Of course, you can think of more advanced scenarios in which you need to have multiple rows updated or really have complex calculations. And I do have an example in which I have a dossier created and multiple rows needs to be created. And I want to have that available both in my app and in my flow. And yeah, the functions is a really cool way to proceed. And while testing, when you have like the more advanced scenarios in which you have multiple input parameters, multiple output parameters, you would like to kind of trace what happens when something enters, especially what happens when something goes wrong. And there, the trace function is a really good to use. You can use that in your Canvas app already, so please use it over there as well. It makes your life easier. And you can use that inside of your function. So when you're using a trace, you can kind of set some information which is helpful when debugging, when you need to find a solution when something goes wrong. So in this example, I did have some information which I put in my trace function. And here you can see the difference. When I want to debug, on the left side, you can see the scenario in which I didn't have the trace function implemented inside of my function. So I can see, okay, I'm happy, this one succeeded, but no clue what actually happened. And in the right side of your screen, you can see the function succeeded, but you do have like the more details which data went through the process. So that's especially in situations when something fails, this is really helpful to use. And also for the trace function, we do have here the screenshot just inside of your Power Apps portal, and you can have the plugin trace viewer from the XRM toolbox available as well, in which it's really helpful as well to have some more information available inside of your trace, or you can use the Power Platform environment settings app in which you do have the plugin trace log as well. So different kind of locations in which you can find some details. So we do have also some special actions available, which they are kind of fun to use in different kind of scenarios. Well, creating a formula and you have like the dynamic, they're helping you sometimes like populating when you're typing something. When you're typing the X, you can see like a different kind of, I call it special actions, which you can use inside of your function. And I would like to demo a scenario in which we're using the special function of a special action in which we will send an app notification. And in this scenario, I do have a canvas app in which user is entering or logging expenses, and they need to get validated by maybe a manager or someone else. And I don't want to send an email. I just want to notify the one that needs to approve or needs to get at least informed about a new record with a notification in his model-driven app. And over here, I created the function in which I added multiple parameters. So I'm setting up like the logic, the details I want to have inside of a notification. And in the Canvas app, I will create an item, and that creation of that item needs to trigger the notification into a Power App. That's the scenario I want to achieve. Now over here, I do have the ability to enter an expense and just save my details. So totally fine. And as soon as that's saved successfully, the manager will receive a notification in which he can immediately open the details of this of the expense that's just entered, without having sent an email, but he can just see what's over there and have like a small panel in which he can immediately see the details of the expense without without navigating to other parts of his app. Over here, you can see in the left side more the details of the formula itself. So please feel free to use it yourself, and here are the details of it. So before moving on, this is the formula. As you can see, we do have the input parameters, but how do we like really implement it inside of the Canvas app to use it? And it's just like the normal Power FX in which you have setting values and a same part in which you trigger a flow. We were mentioning the environment table again and selecting the function, in this case, the send update function. And then we can set the values for the input parameters in which the function needs to use. And you can just select whatever you want over here. Just one thing to mention and be aware of, you need to, in your model-driven app, you need to activate the in-app notifications part in order to use this. So that's just good to know and be aware of. And over here, the overview of what kind of parameters the special action, the send app notification is using. So you can like differentiate them by different kind of icon types and even differentiate in priority and what kind of values it's needed. When using PowerFX, you're used to have the ability in your flows, etc., to use different kind of connectors. And by using the Dataverse Accelerator app, you can use different connections, and you need to make connection references. And it's a bit limited because it's just limited to specific kind of connectors, and sometimes a little bit of a struggle to set it up, but you should be able to use them. And yeah, just curious about the scenarios you can use while also implementing and using connectors inside of your function. So the Power Platform just have a lot of capabilities and ways how we can achieve also same results at the end. But it's also good to compare and evaluate in which scenario what should I use. So a little bit of a comparison between like a function and the Power Automate. It's the differences are like set just divided into some features of it. What's the trigger? You can a function trigger manually, and that's the difference between triggering a flow, which you can also trigger based on a schedule. And the execution is the a big difference between the synchronize and asynchronize, which we'll have a more deep dive in on the next slide. And the execution time is also a big difference. But then I guess a lot of people will just think about approval processes for Power Automate processes that are running for like 30 days. And as I mentioned before, the connectors part, it's just limited from a function perspective, which is way better in Power Automate. That you can't compare really on that part as well. And there's a difference in using like parent-child processes. That's not possible for a function which is available for the Power Automate. I did mention like monitoring and tracing, but I need to be honest, the error tracking for a function is limited compared to what you're able to do in Power Automate. So these are some kind of things you can consider when you need to choose between a function or a Power Automate. Maybe you can, as we've seen before, use it both in the same scenario, but just a short comparison. So as I mentioned, the main difference is like synchronize and asynchronize. And as a low-code developer, you're probably not that aware of really technical terms, but it's good to be aware of at least some terminology. And as we can compare the synchronize in wait in a line scenario and the asynchronize in don't wait around scenario. So let's compare it with like a more real life scenario. So imagine being in a restaurant and staying at the counter, and you order the food, and in the synchronized way of thinking, you order just the food, and you wait at the counter until your food is ready, and then you're sitting down, and then you're gonna eat, which means everyone behind you has to wait. The difference with the asynchronous part is that you're at the counter, you order your food, but you're getting like a number, and you can just sit down and chat, and when your food arrives, when it's ready. And the other customers, you're not blocking them in the line. So that's like just more like anecdotally a difference between synchronized and asynchronized, just to be aware of. Another cool part in which I got aware of based on a video with Scott Duro created a couple of months ago is the transactions part. In a lot of scenarios, as a low-code developer, it's not needed to know a lot about technical details, but it's good to be aware of the transactions. Like a transaction is a sequence of operations, and they either all succeed or all fail. And then you do have the ACID database transactions, which probably the full coders are familiar with, but as a low coder, at least I wasn't. And the ACID is an abbreviation, and in which the A stands for atomic, which means we want to have all operations in a transaction are completely successful or nothing at all should happen. And then we do have the C, which stands for consistency, which means that we need to agree and guarantee that the transaction that takes place brings the database from one valid state into another valid state. And of course, we want to have that into a predictable way. For example, you want to have a unique key and you want to prevent duplicates being inserted. So a transaction would not allow this rule to be broken. And then we do have the I for as isolation, which means that all transactions are like executed independently without interfering from one another. So which means that one transaction will need to wait for the other to start, to be completed in order he could start. And then we do have the D for durable, in which we want to ensure that once we do have the transaction completed, so it remains in the state that it remains so. Let's start over. The D means that we want to ensure that once a transaction is completed, it remains so even in the event of a system failure. So if there was a power loss during the transaction, it cannot leave like the database into the inconsistent state. And if the transaction is committed, then the data must still be in the state once the power is restored. So it's good to be aware of this functionality and of the way the things work inside of Dataverse. And maybe a little bit more for the full coders, they are aware of having the SQL Server transaction. You do have the try and catch available. And in this scenario, we do have two rows which needs to be entered into the database. And there's the second row will fill because it's not allowed in this scenario that the value of our guest is empty, which means that nothing will happen into the database because we roll back the whole transaction. And it's good to be aware how we can do that in the Power App. Up until now, we were only available to use that while writing C# plugins. But that's the cool part for the functions. Of course, you can set up like a manual compensation, but I guess that's often forgotten and it's just happening afterwards. So the user won't receive immediately feedback. The other thing we could use is at least we could use in the Power Automate part is having the change set request, and in which you can enter multiple Dataverse related actions, and when one of those actions fails, it will just roll back and how could I formulate it? Roll back the whole transaction, what we want to do. So for example, in this scenario, when something goes wrong, creating a contact, then also the account won't be created. So in this case, it will get all succeeded or all failed. Which is fine for basic tasks, for like creating, updating, deleting a record. But in more complex scenarios, it doesn't work. For example, in scenarios in which you want to have set up a parent-child relationship, because that logic isn't supported, or you also can't use variables inside of the performance change request action. So when we take a look at a flow, when we do have like the serial execution, then a flow is checking, are there some rows available? And if there are not, we can create a reservation. And When the other flow runs, it will check, are there rows available? Yes, they are. So the data is not available, so I can't do anything. I can't create the record. Which we do have, but when we want to run that in a concurrency way, and we started immediately both the same records in scenario, we have a mix of a reservation on the same date, which is not available or not possible. So therefore, we're taking a look at locking records. And you do have like two different ways of log a record, more like the optimistic logging, which is used inside of database, in which it's just fingers crossed and hope for the best and check at the end. And we do have the pessimistic logging, in which we just log first and then kind of ask questions later. Over here, just an example of those logging of records. I won't have a too deep dive into those differences, but it's just maybe a good thing to be aware of the different kind of things, what happens into your database. It's the more advanced scenarios in which you want to prevent like conflicts, etc. So when we take a look at the more like the pessimistic logging, in this case we do have a trigger in which we want to update a property, and we want first want to lock the property. So the function just takes time, can take this time to run the function, and it won't get interfered by other functions. So it can just double check, is there a reservation? No, and what I can create one. And which means the other function is waiting for the first function to start, which means there is just one transaction in its whole, and then the other one can just get triggered as a second transaction. So in this case, the first transaction can be committed because the list reservations just said, no, there are no rows yet, so we can create them. And for the second one, which has waited for the first transaction to run, just get the result, no, data is not available anymore, so please roll back. So that's the cool part, using the power of X functions to really get your Dataverse tables and having the ACID transactions available without really thinking about it. It's there for you. You don't need to do anything to configure, but it's sometimes just cool to have like the theoretical part inside of your mind, especially when you're thinking on what to use when. Okay, I guess we just missed one important topic these days. I couldn't do this webinar without mentioning, and you're probably aware of it, Copilot. And yes, the cool part is you can use functions in Copilot as well. And it's actually pretty easy. In this case, it's really straightforward. And what you see on the screen is everything I just created. Nothing else, no things behind the screens. I set up a function. I want to have the user to have the availability to count workdays based on a start date and to an end date. So input start date, end date, and output the amount of days between them, or at least the work days between them. And as you can see on the right side, the formula to count just as a power of X formula. So let's move on to the Copilot. And over there, you can add the function as a tool, as a database connector, like we were used into the Power Automate flow as an inbound action. And we can configure it over here. We are adding the perform an inbound action to the Copilot. And as you can see over here, we can define how to use the variables. So for the environment, I'm just setting the values like static values, and then I'm defining the start date and the end date, which I need to have, but then I'm choosing then that needs to be dynamically based on AI. And the user just needs to have a chat. So as what we saw here is everything I need to configure. Just setting up the amount action and mentioning the function, selecting from which environment, and setting the start date and an end date as an AI related value dynamically. And for the user, it looks like exactly in the agent and asking a question. Um, in this, how many days do I need to take off? And the Copilot just pops up and asks, please provide the start date for the action. It's setting it up immediately. So I'm just entering a date. And then, of course, we need to use the end date. And it's asking for the end date. And as soon as I gave that as an input, the function is running and gives the output. And the Copilot gives the answer. So that's really cool. So you can think of a lot of scenarios in which you can use this as well. And no tricks behind the screens. This was just what I entered in, and it works perfectly like this. So to wrap up a bit, some things to consider while creating your functions. There's a little bit of different behavior of the PowerFX syntax. It's using collect instead of fetch, and not all formulas are supported inside of the functions, unfortunately. For example, the concurrent, the group by as, and as you could see in my examples, I used variables, but I couldn't use set or update context, in which way you could use in the Canvas apps, but you should use the with function. So sometimes a little bit of a struggle, but as soon as you know like what's supported or not, your way to go. And of course, on the Learn from Microsoft, you can see all the functions that aren't supported, but a lot of them just are. So as a decision metrics, we can compare like using a function, Power Automate, of just a Power Apps formula itself, and yeah, for complex calculations, it's really useful. You can use it, you can reuse it. It's UI interactions, that's not possible, so therefore you still stick to what's happening to your app. No external API calls, and difference between like you can't schedule the operations, it's just triggering by when you want to have it triggered. And the main best part is the reusability of the business logic you just defined. So what have we seen? We saw these functions working across multiple Power Platform related artifacts, the Power Apps, both the Canvas and the model driven, in Power Automate, and even in Copilot, of course. So yeah, why is this a game changer? For me, I do like it. I don't need to learn another language, no C# for me, but I can really make use of the technique behind the screens. I can code less and do more and reuse the same logic in multiple ways. And because it runs server side, the performance is better, and its security is taken in place and ready. And yeah, it's friendly for makers who aren't pro devs, so it gives them even a better tool set to use. So as I'm aware of, it's still in preview, so that's also always a bit to be careful of. But it's really cool to start using it. And of course, for preparing this presentation, I used multiple resources, which are mentioned over here. And I really recommend you to watch the ACID video on YouTube, which I mentioned over here, and the other examples which I used mentioned over here as well. And now, and if you want to get in contact with me, I do have Twitter. You can find me on LinkedIn, and I do have my own blog available as well, in which you want some more inspiration regarding all Power Platform Microsoft 365 related content. So I will now switch to the chat. Maybe you have already asked some questions. I will go and take a look at it. Um, let's see
Yeah.
how.
So thank you, Eliane, for great presentation demo. So now getting to questions and answers part. Should you wish to ask a question, feel free to type in the chat box now. So one of the questions is, how should organizations approach governance and ALM when introducing functions at scale?
Yeah, as you could see in the presentation, the functions can be part of your solution. So you can just move the function from one environment to another. Yeah, that makes it really useful into ALM scenarios, which is just a big comparison between the automated plugins compared to the functions.
Perfect. So another question there is, can you talk about minimum licensing needs when using functions in Power Apps and flows and general practices around that?
It's Dataverse related, so therefore you need a premium license, but that's it. And as you could see in the flow, when you want to use it, it's an unbound action, which is a Dataverse action. So therefore the license is needed.
Perfect. So just another question there is, what are the potential pitfalls for citizen developers when implementing functions without a strong understanding of data relationships?
I guess that's the same regarding having them implementing PowerFX functions into an app. I won't see that much difference because theoretically they can use the same logic into an app and setting it up in different kind of creative ways in a flow. So therefore, I won't see that much of a pitfall. Um, so yeah, that should my I guess it's something a citizen developer isn't aware of that this functionality is available. I guess for more experienced developers, they maybe need to introduce the citizen developers to this new functionality as well.
Perfect. Next question there is, how does Dataverse handle dependency um, management when functions call other functions or interact with complex table relationships?
Phew, I'm I'm not sure if I do get that question, if I do understand that correctly. Um, with complex table relationships, I'm not sure how to answer it. I guess I don't get the question right.
Perfect. No worries. Yeah, I think that's all the questions at the end. So on behalf of the ESPC community, we'd like to extend a big thank you to you again, Eliane, for taking time out today
You're
to carry
welcome.
this webinar. Really appreciate it. So that's the end of today's webinar. You can find this webinar and more at sharepointeurope.com/resource center. Thanks again for all of you joining us today, and I hope you join us again soon. Take care.
Thank you for all for joining. Bye bye.